So there's a certain genre of game that I really typically enjoy, and it's these card-driven GMT games. Now, they're not the prettiest looking games. No one can dispute that, but they are some of the most fun playing games. And we've taken a look at Twilight Struggle already. #1 game on Board Game Geek for a long time, forever and ever. Took a look at 1989, recently a follow-up kind of sequel to Twilight Struggle. It has a laser focus on the year of 1989, whereas Twilight Struggle has the entire Cold War. The one sitting to the left of Twilight Struggle is even more laser focused. It focuses on one event. Well, a season, I should say, but it's not an entire year. It's basically the election and leading up to the election and the years leading up to the 1960 election between Nixon and Kennedy. Hence the name. The game is called 1960, The Making of the President. One person plays Nixon, one person plays Kennedy. And you see how it all shakes out. Does it go the way of history, or does it go the way of revisionist history? Which, that's another debate for another time, obviously, but let's find out today not only who wins the election, but how does the election play out? How do you play the election? And is it as good as counterparts there? Let's take a look right now. Now, if you remember back in my Twilight Struggle review, I made a joke where I was looking at the rule books, right, and I acted like I got up and left because it was too confusing and difficult to read because it was a GMT war game rule book, right? You remember that? Well, after I made that joke, Jason Matthews, the designer of, well, this one and one of the co-designers of all three of these games, sent me a message on Board Game Geek and said, hey, well, the reason we did this is because it's a war game, therefore the war game genre has certain rule type books that people are used to. And after making that video, I have to agree that the rulebook, while weird and methodical, and the whole 7.1, 7.2, 7.3.2.1 is strange to the naked eye, it's actually really handy. This rulebook, however, is not like that. It doesn't have the 8.1, 1.2 dash thing like that. The rulebook itself looks a little bit like this. So instead of, having the 7.1, 1.2, it just kind of opens up, shows you the entire board set up, shows you all the pieces up there, shows you what the things do, how to do things, political, capital bags, support checks, initiative checks, reseating. Now, as I'm reading this, though, what I've noticed after reading through this a couple times, it's still laid out much like the whole 1.1, 1.2. It just doesn't show it. So it looks a lot more like a normal rule book for a normal board game. But it actually is the same kind of layout as a GMT one. So you learn the game just as easy as you do through a GMT one, but it also looks more accessible. Plus, look at this full color cover, right? Isn't that great? So that's what the rule book looks like. A little bit different, and I like it. I should like it a whole lot. Let's talk components real quick, and then we'll dive into how to play the game. Now let's take a look at what comes in the back box here. Look at this nice bag, right? So what's the bag for? Well, for this right here. So wait a minute, what are those cubes for? Are those wooden cubes? Is that supposed to be spice or indigo or something like that? No. This is not a Euro game in that sense. This is a card-driven political game by GMT, but these cubes mean something different. That's right, these cubes represent something totally different. In this game, they represent voting support. Everybody has their own little screen-printed thing. This one for the Democrats. And this one for the Republicans. Look at that, screen printed onto the wood. Very nice, not a sticker. Well done, GMT. These start on your home states, California for Nixon and Massachusetts for Kennedy. Of course, that makes sense. Everyone starts with 12 cubes in this bag. The whole point of the black bag is you do support checks. We'll talk about what a support check is in just a minute. These cubes represent the support. Also, the white cubes go up here for your turn track and your phase track. The rest of these would go off the board, 12 of each color, 12 blues, and 12 reds would go into the bag to seed it for the bag. This is what the game looks like set up. Now, I'm not talented enough to freeze myself into this position for when I snap and the board to be set up, so just know that it's going to be a jerky little snap here, but hey, movie magic. And there's the full game set up right there, just like that. These are the starting positions. All the red cubes represent Republican support, all the blue cubes, just like in, real life, Representative Democrat support. They start where they start. 2 cubes in spaces that have 2 donkeys, 2 cubes in spaces that have 2 elephants, 1 in 1 elephant, 1 in 1 donkey. That's how it works. Republicans, Democrats starting support. This is based on the support of the 1960s electoral race. So a lot of stuff happens in 1960. This race is huge. Obviously, the first televised debates happened in 1960. But let's finish the component quality stuff right now. First of all, there are these momentum tokens, which are basically presidential election buttons, which are incredible campaign buttons. They look so good. One of the best looking games GMT has made in a long time. I'll go ahead and say that up front. You got these 3 tokens here for your issues tracks. You get defense, economy, and civil rights. Huge in 1960, obviously. You've got the Nixon rest area and the Kennedy rest area. Not like rest area, but you know, whatever. Campaign strategy space for both players. And then these media tracks, and we'll go around what these mean for the endorsement in the media spaces here. The other component thing is these endorsement chits, tokens, whatever. They're a little bit bigger size than the tokens out of Twilight Struggle or the other games, but these go on when you have a media endorsement. We'll talk about what that does in just a minute. As you guessed it, there are cards in this game. It is a card-driven game. Let's look at the cards and see how they play. Spoiler, they play just like the other games, but that's a good thing. So let's look at this. One last thing. Prevention events, debate events, election day events. There's one more piece I didn't mention is there's this little mini board for the mini game of the debates. The debates is a great section of the game, and it's a really cool break in momentum. Not momentum, that sounds bad, but it's a break in monotony. It has a break in the monotony and lets you do a really cool thing. Also, you plan for it ahead of time. So let's look at what the cards do and how they play right now. There are 2 decks of cards in the game. First of all, there's the endorsement cards. We'll talk about those in a minute. And then the whole deck of campaign cards, which are these normal backed cards of 1960 that make me president. There are 2 more cards that would be the presidential cards. This is neat. Everyone gets their own unique presidential card. Kennedy and Nixon, just like that. These do things. They give you 5 CP, which are campaign points, not operations points, right? Or support points. These get flipped over to exhausted side when you use them. They can only be flipped back over when certain events allow you to do that. So that's what these are for. Now, the campaign cards look like this. They look a lot like the other games, and that is not a knock, that's a compliment. I love the color scheme. I love the nice graphic detail they put up here and kind of weathering them, making them look aged. Very cool, good looking stuff. A few different things about each one. Democratic symbol, civil rights symbol in this one. This is an issue symbol. Each one has a different issue symbol of the 3 issues. Campaign points up here and rest up here. So the rest, the whole point of the rest is that when it says rest, if you play this card, you will put one of your cubes into your rest area on the board. The reason that happens is during the last phase, during the rest phase, you'll take all the rest cubes and put it into the bag. So when you do support checks, the more cubes you have in the bag, obviously the better chance you have of getting a successful support check. We'll talk about what support checks are in just a minute. First of all, you can spend it for the event. So for this one, for the remainder of the turn, the Nixon player must expend 1 momentum marker in order to play the card as an event. We'll talk about what that means in just a second. This is another one, GAF. This is a great card. Notice that that one was just for the Democrats. It works better for the Democrats as a Democrat event. This one works for either. This is GAF. It says opponent loses 1 momentum marker and 3 state support in the state currently occupied by their candidate token. So this one could be played for either the event or the 4 campaign points. What does that mean? Well, here's the deal. These new things are the support tokens. Used to, the rule was in Twilight Struggle and 1989 is when you play an event of the other team, let's just say that the Kennedy character plays this card. Well, this is a Republican event, but because they play this, normally in the other games, the event would just trigger. Well, that's not how it works. At the beginning of the game, each player gets 2 momentum tokens. In order for the player to force the opponent to trigger the event against them, so let's say, again, Kennedy plays this event, it's a Nixon card, the Nixon player says, no, I want that event to trigger. Instead of it just automatically triggering, you have to play a momentum marker for that to trigger. The other player, if they know it's a bad card coming that they really want to avoid having that happen to them, they can do what's called preempting it by spending 2 momentum markers. You can get momentum markers back with one of the actions we'll talk about in just a minute. Now let's see what happens with these cubes and how this all works on the board. Also, one more thing, state down here has to do with the last of the election day. We'll talk about that in a minute. So first things first is the initiative check. At the beginning of the turn, you'll do what's called the initiative check. You'll reach into the bag here, you'll pull out cubes until the first team has 2 of their cubes pulled out. that person has initiative for the round. That person basically gets to go first or choose who goes first, so you can be reactionary if you wanted to. They also get to do different things in certain tie situations, but that's what the initiative does. Then you move on to playing cards. So let's just say you want to play for campaign points. Well, your marker has to be in the region you're campaigning in. So Kennedy right now is in the east, so he could, campaign here. Let's just say he wants to spend 3 campaign points to add support to, let's say, Connecticut. Well, he would then move his token to Connecticut. So what does moving the token in the region have to do with? We'll talk about that in just a minute. Now let's just say he wanted to add support in Vermont. To carry a state, you have to have 4 support cubes in the state. Nixon does not carry Vermont right now, so to add a support cube, it would look like this. You would not do this. You wouldn't put 2 cubes there of the different colors. You would take 1 off, then 2. So that would be 1, 2, 3 right there. All 3 support cube points, campaign points are spent by adding and taking away cubes. That's how you spend it as normal points. Now let's just say that Nixon was also over here in the east and he was in Vermont. Doesn't matter if Nixon's carrying it or not, because these 2 markers are in the same space. You would then have to do a support check. The way a support check works is, it's kind of like Arkham Horror, the card game. You reach in the bag, well, if it's a blue one, you get to put the support there. Or yeah, in this case, you would put the support there. If it was a red one, you just kind of lose a turn with that. Not lose a turn, but you don't get anything for it. So it's kind of a gamble if they're there. The other way you have to do a support check is if the character is leading in that area. If they're carrying the state, then you would have to do it. Another way you can spend a campaign point is to move your marker to a different region. You can also split that up. You could go 1 and then spend 2 campaign points there out of the 3. You don't have to do it in any order. You could do 1, spend 2 if you wanted to. That's kind of the cool thing about that. So that's what you can do with campaign points alone right there. Another action you can do is position on the issue. So let's just say that instead of spending those campaign points for campaigning out here, you want to position on an issue. So the reason this is important is, let's just say you say, well, okay, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3. Costs you 1 campaign point for the first cube, 2 for each sequential cube. So you could do 1, 2, 3. Well, now Nixon leads it. So then at the end of the turn, in what's called the momentum part of the phase, these would score you the bonuses at the bottom. The 3rd place issue would be 1 momentum marker, which are these here. 2nd place issue is 1 momentum or an endorsement, and the 1st place issue is 1 momentum marker and an endorsement. So why are these not just solidified to the board? Well, here's the thing. The 3rd action, which we'll talk about in just a minute, of marketing to different places, these or cubes, allows you to switch the order of these tracks. So let's just say you have more media attention. You could, let's say Nixon was actually leading here, but not here. Let's say it was like that. Well, instead, you want the bonus. You would then switch this to here, because you can switch 2 adjacent ones. And now you're leading the 1st place issue, not the 2nd one, because you're controlling the media and you're controlling the narrative, basically is how that works. We all know how this works. This 2016 election just happened. At the end of the turn, you'll play 5 cards out of your hand. You'll get dealt 6. You'll play 5 cards. 1 card will go into your campaign strategy. The campaign strategy is for the debates at first and then election day second. We'll talk about the debates and what the whole point of that is when we get to the debate minigame. One more thing you can do is campaign for media coverage, and that looks like this. So notice in every region there's one of these symbols here with the media picture on it down there. The art in this game, by the way, is fantastic. It just looks really great. But the different media symbols are there. One of the things you can do is spend campaign points to do a support check to add cubes to the media coverage. Now this is like the states. You can't have 2 of the same color there. So to add support there, if you passed it, it would actually be like this. 1, 2, 3. This also allows you to get past one other thing. Even if a president candidate is carrying a state in that region, if you have media coverage there, an endorsement here, you don't have to do a support check when removing from where they're carrying. You can just pull them away like normal, which is pretty great. So it helps you if someone's got a lockdown, because you can have more than 4 cubes on a state, so it helps you with the lockdown. So what is the whole point of this? How do you get points at the end of the game? Well, when the election happens at the end of the game, you score the electoral votes of each place. Notice the ones that have a red banner or a blue banner. If these are empty at the end of the game, they're going to lean the direction that they favor. So if Alabama was empty, it would favor Democrats. Now, if you have media endorsement at the end of the game, there's bonuses that would go towards that, where if this were empty but you have media in the area, this would favor you, not the one that's blank. So what are endorsement cards? Endorsements say things like this: place one of your endorsement markers in the south. If your opponent already has one or more endorsement markers in that region, remove one of those markers instead. So your endorsement markers work basically like cubes, but they sit on the endorsement section of the board, and this is kind of what gives you that bonus at the end of the game, as well as media endorsement lets you move the positions of the issues track around how you would like it. So let's talk the debates. Notice that the three issues go in these slots. So first place, second place, third place. You would have a chance before the debates to switch the order of the issues. So you would take the tokens and put them over here. So you may have civil rights or defense or economy here. So we'll do that right now. We'll say that economy is in first place, that defense is in second place, and that civil rights is in third place. And remember, these things bounced around all through the campaign because it was a tenuous time and a lot of things happened. So it was kind of a crazy thing, right? Nixon looked bad. He didn't look like he wanted to be there. So technically that's what they say was one of the things, the determining factors why Kennedy won the debates. Now, whether that cost him the election or not is that's something historians will debate. Now, notice that I mentioned there were symbols here. The way this works is that you will place these cards that you have under your campaign strategy. So let's say you had 5 cards under your campaign strategy, which you will. The way it works is you're going to simultaneously select a card. Now, the left or the right side of the debate board is where the card's going to go based on the symbol. If it has 2 symbols, you get to pick. If it has your symbol, you would put it on your side. If it has the other person's symbol, you put it on the other person's side. No reason to put a campaign strategy card of the other person into your campaign strategy. It just doesn't make sense. Now, you would then look at this symbol here. You're trying to get 2 of the same symbol out there on your side. Now let's just say it's a tie. That's because you're playing simultaneously. Let's say it goes 2 on civil rights and 2 more on civil rights. Now it doesn't have to happen like that. The first person who gets 2 symbols on their side immediately stops it and scores it. So this, let's just say it was 2 and 2. Then you would go by campaign points. So this would be 6 versus, let's say, 4. Person over there wins it. The winnings for the first issue awarded is 2 support cubes. Second issue is 3 support cubes. Third is 4 support cubes. You say, why does the prize increase? Well, it increases because it helps you to play strategically. Now, let's just say that all your symbols are gone. The other person's going to get to rack up. So you have to kind of carefully stage these things out and wager them. Now, if one's already been awarded, you can't play cards there. So if you got all your eggs in one basket, well, just know that the other person is probably going to get the rest of the points. The other thing is, if you run out, you just score them and resolve them based on the highest campaign points and such. So it's a good way to get some support. It is not subject to anything. You don't have to do support checks. You just get to add or take away support. So that's what the debates are all about. Now, election day happens a little bit differently. You'll put 2 cards, because you'll be dealt 7 cards each round for round 7 and 8. You'll deal 2 cards to your campaign strategy, and the rest of this stuff doesn't matter for campaign strategy on election day. Basically, what happens is you will look at the state in the bottom right. You will then, at the end of the game, during the election time, get to do support checks in those states. You'll get 3 support checks, which basically means you'll reach into the bag and pull out cubes. If it's your color, you get to add support there. If it's their color, nothing happens. So let's talk election day in the phases right now. You deposit bonus cubes in there, so this would be equal to your media support. You'll take any cubes you have off the media support and you'll put it in there. You'll take anything off the issues track, you'll put them in there as well. You'll then take the initiative check, campaign strategy, reveal your cards, do your support checks if you can. If the bag runs out here, you do not get to refill the bag, and so you might just forfeit some of your support checks. You'll then do the election day events. So any events that would say election day on them, they would be right here on the board. You would do them. Some of them are typically like support checks in areas. You'll then do endorsements and edges. Each empty state in the region with an endorsement marker receives a cube of that player's color. Each empty state that doesn't have a cube, so like I mentioned earlier, goes to the blue ribbon or the red ribbon. Collect the seals, get the tally, and that's how you win right there. So let's talk 1960. How does this game stack up against its 2 other brothers, right? Twilight Struggle and 1989 by Jason Matthews, right? Well, 1960 does a lot of things that I really like. First of all, wooden cubes, that's great. Could you make that work in Twilight Struggle? I don't know, probably, but the whole control and presence thing, maybe not, right? Love the components. The little campaign buttons for momentum markers is a fantastic idea. Also, momentum buttons alone, the momentum markers alone is a great concept. It's almost like this is more of a beginner and less mean version of the other games because, for instance, you could preempt. Let's say you don't want that event to take place. Well, you just spend 2 of your momentum markers. Well, let's say you do want the event to take place and you're the other player. Well, you just spend a momentum marker. It doesn't automatically happen, so it takes a little bit of the sting out of the cards in your hand because then you go, are they going to play a momentum marker for this? Or maybe you can bluff, maybe like, oh gosh, you can't really bluff in the sense, but you can make something seem worse, if they go, wow, gosh, you really need to do that. That's crazy. I don't know. It's all strategy, stuff like that. But I love the way that plays out. 1960, man, this is a tumultuous time. You're talking about lots of really big issues. Civil Rights Act of 1960, obviously Eisenhower, as this debate is happening, as this stuff is going on, signs that into law. But you've also got, the Democrats in the South who are, holding on to that kind of stuff. And so you've got Kennedy going, okay, do I lose my Democratic voters by pushing, civil rights being a thing? Or it's all this kind of crazy stuff. You got the economy, you've got kind of the hawkish Nixon in there, very, very pro-war, very hawkish in that sense. And so you've got a really tumultuous time. It's the middle of the Cold War. Khrushchev on the other side of the aisle, and Russia is just absolutely, he's a tough guy. I mean, he's eventually deposed, obviously, spoiler if you haven't looked at history, but he was put down by his own people for being ineffective, it seems. So this is a tough guy that they're going up against. Obviously, we know Kennedy wins this election, goes on to prevent World War III in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and my goodness, maybe things would have turned out different under Nixon. Maybe for the worse, maybe for the better. We don't know. All we really remember is this idolized version of these presidents, right? You forget sometimes that Kennedy only served a very short time, yet he's legendary, right? He's kind of like Reagan on the right. He's legendary, even though what you look at them today, you'd say, well, maybe they're a little bit different than the legend. It doesn't matter. They're larger than life. These figures, Kennedy and Reagan, obviously these are two different figures who, from two different political sides, although Kennedy now is more like a Republican conservative, if you look at it, and that's a debate for another time too, and not to get into politics, but I mean, you can just look at the difference that our history has brought us to in politics. And it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you come from. I have a feeling that Jason Matthews and I would be on different sides of the aisle, maybe not. But that's the beautiful thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're on the right. It doesn't matter if you're on the left. It doesn't matter where you fall politically. You can enjoy this game without having an argument with your friends. Well, I think Donald Trump shouldn't have won. I think Hillary Clinton did this. It doesn't matter. You can still play this game with people on the other side of the aisle and still enjoy it. And that's what's beautiful. And that's what we need in this country, for goodness sakes, to be able to talk to people again, right? That's why I love 1960. It feels more casual and accessible than the other two, but it's still a really good game. And I love the debate mini-game mechanic. I think that's a really cool idea, doing the debate mini-game where you're having to plan your campaign strategy out too. What are we going to talk about at the debates? What are we going to do? There's only two events that are permanent events in this one. There's not like, all the, Solidarity and, Anwar Sadat and all those different ones from the other games. There's only two. It's the Greater Houston Baptist Association, and I think Eisenhower's late endorsement or something like that. So that's 1960 in a nutshell. It's crazy, it's intense, it's fun, it's push and pull. I love all the new mechanics. I love the support checks where you reach into the bag, the initiative checks, all this stuff's great. You really should check out 1960, especially in this gorgeous reprint. No, I mean, GMT has just really stepped up their game. The board still doesn't lay flat. That's not GMT's problem necessarily. That's just boards in general. But the board still doesn't lay all the way flat, so that's my only gripe. But man, it looks beautiful. Those campaign buttons are awesome. The wooden pieces with the screen printed Republican and Democrat sign is great. The board is really pretty. It takes all the things that people say they like about Food Chain Magnate, that classic era, right, and puts it in an even prettier polished version in this 1960 board. The electoral votes are correct based on the year, so you've got the historical accuracy of that. I love it. 1960 is an awesome game, and it's a way to get people into playing. If they enjoy this one, they might play Twilight Struggle. For instance, my wife would probably play 1960 before she would play Twilight Struggle because she's seen kind of what Twilight Struggle looks like on the table. 1960 is gorgeous. It just looks pretty. So, 1960, go get this game. My gosh, it's good. It's your way into some of these deeper strategy games by GMT, but it still has all the card-drivenness, has the mini-game thing, and it plays faster. We played this in 2 hours while learning it the whole time. So that is 1960, The Making of a President. Fantastic game. Doesn't matter where you line up politically, you will enjoy this game. Doesn't matter where your opponent lines up politically. That is what I think is so important. Check it out. For more videos, check out the latest retro here on the Dice Tower. Until then, we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching the Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.